The line outside the grand ballroom of the Hawthorne Tower began forming before sunrise, a strange mixture of polished shoes, designer perfume, nervous smiles, and quiet ambition. Men in tailored suits rehearsing clever introductions. Women checking reflections in dark phone screens. Every person invited under the same promise. One private morning event where the city's most powerful single elites would meet face to face before the market opened. 3 floors below that polished world, Ethan Carter was carrying 2 trays of warm croissants up a service staircase. His shoulder pressed against the heavy metal door, the smell of butter and cinnamon following him like a second skin. He had been awake since 4 shaping dough, while his 7-year-old daughter Lily colored paper stars behind the bakery counter because missing a luxury catering delivery meant losing half a week's income, and half a week's income meant another late utility payment. He had no reason to know that one wrong turn, one distracted glance at the elevator sign taped to the wall, would push him directly into a room built for people who had never once worried about choosing between electricity and rent. "Sir, you're late," a woman in black whispered sharply the second he stepped through the side entrance. Before Ethan could explain, someone clipped a silver number card onto his jacket, turned him by the shoulders, and guided him toward a line of sharply dressed strangers waiting under crystal chandeliers. "No, I think there's been a mistake." He began balancing the trays carefully, but the woman had already disappeared, heels clicking across marble. Around him, conversations lowered, heads turned. Ethan looked down at the flower still dusted faintly across his sleeve, then at the handwritten number now pinned to his chest, like he belonged there. Across the line, a woman dressed in charcoal gray stood perfectly still, one hand wrapped around a black coffee cup, her expression unreadable, colder than the polished glass walls behind her. Victoria Hale. Even Ethan recognized her, the CEO, whose face appeared on financial magazines the woman reporters called the city's most untouchable executive, famous for billion-dollar decisions and a stare that made seasoned investors lose their script. She looked at him once slowly from his worn boots to the tray in his hands, and something in her expression hardened further, as if the morning had already insulted her. "If this is someone's attempt at irony," she said, voice low enough that only he could hear, "it's not amusing." Ethan shifted the tray before one croissant slid. "Trust me," he answered quietly. "If I had intended to walk into a room full of expensive people judging me before breakfast, I'd have at least worn a clean shirt." For the briefest second, something flickered in her eyes. Not warmth, not yet, but interruption. Then the service door behind Ethan burst open. Small footsteps ran across marble. Dad Lily's voice cut through the ballroom before he could stop her. She appeared in the doorway clutching a tiny paper bag and froze when she saw the chandeliers, the strangers, and the woman in gray staring directly at her father. Then Lily looked up at Victoria with innocent certainty and said the one sentence no board member, journalist, or rival had ever dared tell her. "You look like someone who forgot how to smile." Silence fell so completely that even the ballroom pianist stopped touching the keys. Lily's voice seemed too small to belong inside a room built for negotiations worth millions. Yet somehow it landed harder than every rehearsed introduction floating through the ballroom that morning. Several heads turned at once. A man adjusting his cufflinks near the registration table actually laughed under his breath, expecting the sharp woman in gray to destroy the child's confidence with one glance. But Victoria Hale did not answer immediately. She stood there, fingers tightening around her coffee cup, eyes fixed on Lily as though the little girl had spoken in a language she had not heard in years. Ethan reacted first. He set one tray carefully onto the nearest cocktail table before kneeling beside his daughter, lowering his voice. "Lily, sweetheart, you weren't supposed to come upstairs." Lily looked guilty for exactly 1 second, then held up the small paper bag she carried. "You forgot the strawberry one," she whispered, meaning the pastry he had promised the client as an extra sample. Ethan exhaled softly, half embarrassed, half trying not to smile in front of the crowd, staring at him like he had dragged real life into a staged performance. "I had it handled." "No, you didn't." Lily said with childlike certainty. "You always forget the last thing when you're nervous." That word nervous earned another glance from Victoria because the man in front of her did not look nervous. He looked tired, careful, grounded in a way that made the expensive room seem artificial around him. Ethan stood, took the paper bag, then looked at Victoria with an apologetic calm that somehow contained no desperation. "Sorry. We'll be out of your way in 10 seconds. Before he could move, the event coordinator reappeared breathless and smiling the forced smile of someone protecting a schedule worth too much money. "Perfect. Pair 1 is ready. Ms. Hale. Mr. She glanced at Ethan's borrowed number card. "Mr. Carter, please take table 1. Ethan frowned. "No, there's definitely wonderful." The woman cut in, already gesturing toward a private table near the windows overlooking downtown. 3 minutes each round. Then she vanished again, abandoning him inside a mistake growing too public to explain. Victoria gave him one look that clearly said she hated wasted time. "You can leave," she said, turning slightly, but Lily had already noticed the tiny silver timer placed on the table and whispered, "Dad, maybe sit down." You never meet anyone. A few nearby guests smiled openly, now entertained by the absurdity. Ethan understood that arguing would only make it worse. He picked up the tray, set it carefully on the side station, then pulled out the chair opposite Victoria. 3 minutes, he said quietly. "Then I'd disappear and return to bread, which is where I belong." Victoria sat without replying. Through the window behind her, morning light sharpened the angles of her face, controlled. Elegant, impossible to read. Up close, Ethan noticed not perfection, but exhaustion hidden beneath immaculate composure, the kind that expensive makeup softened but did not erase. The silver timer clicked on. Neither spoke for 2 seconds. Then Victoria placed her coffee down with exact precision. "So which strategy are you using?" she asked. Ethan blinked. "Strategy? Pretending not to know who I am. Bringing a child for sympathy. Showing up dressed like authenticity itself." Her voice remained level, but there was steel under every word. Ethan almost smiled because the accusation was so far from his morning that it felt unreal. "My strategy was delivering croissants to Ballroom 7 before they got cold. And yet here you are? Against my will, I assure you." Lily stood beside Ethan's chair, peeking over the table edge until Victoria noticed her again. "Do you own this building?" Lily asked. Ethan murmured, "Lily." "No," Victoria answered unexpectedly. "Just the company that financed half of it." "That sounds lonely," Lily said. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second because only Lily could make billion-dollar ownership sound like a tragedy. To his surprise, Victoria did not look offended. She studied the child longer this time. "Why would you say that?" Lily shrugged. "Because my dad owns almost nothing and he's never alone. Everyone at the bakery talks to him." A faint laugh escaped from somewhere nearby, quickly suppressed. Victoria's jaw tightened, not from anger, Ethan realized, but from something else harder to define, as if the conversation had wandered into territory she had carefully fenced off years ago. "People talk because they want something," she said. Sometimes Lily answered. "Sometimes they talk because they like your face." Ethan finally intervened. "Okay. Enough social analysis before school." "She's observant," Victoria said. And that was the first sentence she had spoken that sounded human rather than defensive. Ethan noticed it instantly. So did Lily. Encouraged, the little girl reached into her coat pocket and placed a folded paper star on the table between them. "I made extra because mornings are hard." Victoria stared at the star as if no one had handed her something free in years. The timer beeped, ending the round. Across the room, the coordinator announced partner rotation, but Victoria did not stand immediately. Ethan rose first. That should end the confusion. He reached for the paper star, thinking Lily had crossed a line, but Victoria touched it first. "Leave it." Her fingers stopped just above his hand, not touching, but close enough that both noticed. Something changed in her face then. Not softness exactly, more like a crack too brief for anyone else to see. Ethan withdrew his hand. As you wish. Another man approached their table, smiling with aggressive confidence. Clearly scheduled for Victoria next. She looked at him, then at Ethan, then at Lily waiting beside the chair. You delivered food? She asked. Ethan nodded. Bakery downstairs. Carter and Crumbs. The one on Ashbury. You know it? I pass it. She did not add that she had passed it dozens of mornings without ever entering, always seeing warm light through the windows while her driver waited at the curb, always choosing not to look too long. The approaching man reached the table. Victoria, pleasure again, he said, already extending a hand. Victoria stood, but her attention stayed on Ethan for 1 second longer than necessary. Your tray is cooling, she said. It sounded dismissive, but the tone had changed enough that Ethan noticed. He took Lily's hand and stepped away just as the coordinator rushed back, apologizing breathlessly for the registration mistake. Sir, terribly sorry your badge was from a canceled guest. Ethan removed it and handed it over. No damage done. But behind him, he heard the new man trying too hard to impress Victoria with acquisition numbers, while Victoria answered with silence. By the time Ethan reached the service elevator, Lily looked up and asked, Was she sad? He pressed the button and glanced toward the ballroom doors. Why do you think that? Because people who are angry all the time are usually protecting something sad. Children, he thought, should not understand that so early. Maybe he answered. Downstairs, the bakery welcomed them with warmth, butter, and the normal rhythm of ordinary life. Ethan slid trays into the front display while Lily took her usual stool near the register before school. Customers came quickly, the retired mailman, 2 nurses from the clinic, a college student ordering coffee before class. The morning moved the way mornings always moved. Practical, busy, familiar. By 9:15, Ethan had nearly forgotten the absurd ballroom upstairs until the bakery door opened and silence fell. In that subtle way, silence changes when someone powerful enters a small room. Victoria Hale stepped inside alone. No assistant, no driver visible, no expression prepared for cameras. She wore the same charcoal coat, though now sunlight through the bakery glass softened her sharpness. The retired mailman almost dropped his wallet, recognizing her. Ethan looked up from the espresso machine and genuinely thought for 1 strange second that she had come to complain. Instead, she scanned the menu board as if learning a foreign language. Lily noticed first and smiled like she had been expecting this. You came, she announced. Victoria's eyes shifted toward her. Apparently. Ethan wiped his hands and approached the counter. We also serve people not accidentally assigned to emotional interviews. Something very close to a smile threatened one corner of Victoria's mouth before disappearing. 1 coffee, she said. And whatever she gave me this morning. Lily leaned over the counter proudly. That was kindness. It's free. A few customers laughed softly. Victoria reached for her wallet anyway. Ethan placed a small strawberry pastry onto a plate and slid it toward her. First one's on the house, for surviving public speed dating. She looked at the pastry longer than necessary, then took the seat nearest the window. Outside, traffic moved in polished streams, but inside the bakery the world slowed under warm light and cinnamon air. Victoria removed 1 glove, touched the paper star still in her coat pocket without meaning to, and for the first time in months, perhaps years, she stayed somewhere with nowhere urgent to go. Ethan returned to the counter, pretending not to watch. Lily colored quietly beside the register, occasionally glancing at Victoria with the fearless curiosity only children possess. The city's coldest CEO lifted the pastry, tasted it, and something almost imperceptible shifted in her expression. Not pleasure alone, but recognition, as if warmth itself had returned, disguised as strawberry and butter. Ethan noticed, because he had learned after loss, that tiny changes often meant more than dramatic ones. He did not know yet that this morning would return tomorrow and the morning after that, until neither of them could pretend the wrong line had ended where it began. Victoria returned the next morning at exactly 7:12, early enough that the city outside still carried that unfinished silence between rush hour and sunrise, when delivery trucks moved like shadows and the bakery windows reflected more sky than traffic. Ethan noticed her before the bell above the door rang because her driverless black sedan stopped across the street and remained parked longer than necessary, as if even arriving required an internal negotiation she did not want to admit she was having. Inside the bakery glowed gold under hanging lamps, fresh brioche cooling on metal racks, espresso steaming cinnamon lifting through warm air in slow, invisible waves. Lily sat on her stool near the counter, finishing homework, before school legs swinging, humming quietly while drawing tiny stars in the margin of her notebook. Ethan was sliding a tray of almond pastries into the front case when Victoria stepped in wearing a dark wool coat and no expression prepared for anyone. No makeup team, no assistant, no corporate armor beyond posture and silence. She looked almost younger in ordinary morning light, though the restraint in her eyes remained intact, as if softness had to be monitored before entering public space. Ethan pretended not to register the precision of her return. "You found your way back without accidentally joining another event?" he asked while wiping flour from his hands. "Your sign is visible from the street," she replied, voice controlled but less edged than yesterday. "And your coffee yesterday was acceptable." Lily looked up immediately. "That means she liked it." Victoria glanced at the child. "It means I came because my office opens later than usual." "That also means you liked it," Lily said, completely unmoved by status. Ethan hid a smile and reached for a cup. Same order. Victoria hesitated, scanning the handwritten board like someone still unconvinced she belonged under it. "Coffee, black." "Still sounds like punishment," Ethan said. "Coffee doesn't need decoration. Neither do people," Lily added. Victoria looked at her again, and for a second Ethan saw that same tiny fracture from yesterday, the moment when a reply formed but stopped because it required feeling first. She took the seat by the window before the cup arrived, setting her phone face down beside the plate Ethan placed near her warm apple pastry, this time still releasing steam. Outside, dawn moved slowly over glass buildings. Inside, forks touched ceramic milk, steamed, the front bell rang with neighborhood regulars who all recognized Victoria, but politely pretended not to stare too long. That Ethan suspected unsettled her more than attention would have. In corporate rooms, people watched her because they needed something. Here, they simply made room, ordered bread, discussed weather, and let silence exist without agenda. An elderly woman from 2 doors down smiled while paying for muffins and said, "Try the apple before it cools." "Dear?" Victoria gave the smallest nod, as if unsure how to receive ordinary kindness from strangers. Ethan returned to kneading dough behind the counter, sleeves rolled, forearms dusted white, moving with the quiet rhythm of someone whose hands had learned survival through repetition. Victoria watched longer than she intended. There was nothing performative in the way he worked. No attempt to impress, no careful masculinity, no effort to turn simplicity into charm. He moved like someone who had stopped expecting to be noticed, and therefore became more noticeable. Lily climbed off her stool after a while, carrying colored pencils and paper toward Victoria's table without asking permission. "Do you always sit alone?" she asked. Victoria looked down from the email she had not yet opened. "Usually." "Do you like it?" Lily asked. "It's efficient." "That sounds like no." Victoria almost answered sharply, but Lily had already spread paper across the table and begun drawing a crooked bakery with exaggerated windows. "Dad says some people think being alone is easier because nobody can break your things." Victoria's fingers froze lightly around the coffee cup. "Your father says that." "Not with words, exactly. But after Mom died, he stopped talking for a while, so I learned the quiet parts." Ethan, hearing that from behind the counter, looked up instinctively. The sentence landed harder than Lily understood. Victoria noticed his glance, and for the first time saw pain cross his face before he hid it. Not dramatic pain, not self-advertised grief, just the kind that had become part of his posture over years. "Your mother died?" she asked Lily more softly than Ethan expected. Lily nodded while drawing. "Car accident, 4 winters ago. Dad still checks my seatbelt twice every time." Victoria's gaze shifted toward Ethan again. Suddenly his calm acquired weight the early mornings. The measured tone, the refusal to hurry even when busy. She knew something about surviving by building systems around pain, though hers had taken the shape of boardrooms instead of ovens. Her own phone lit up, then Mason Reed third call this morning. She ignored it. "Do you have children?" Lily asked next, because children moved where adults installed barriers. Victoria answered too quickly. "No." "Do you want one?" Ethan nearly dropped the dough scraper. "Lily." But Victoria surprised him again by not retreating. She looked at the half-finished drawing instead of the child. "I used to think I would." "Then what happened?" Lily asked. Outside, a bus passed, sunlight catching the glass just long enough to paint moving reflections across Victoria's face. "Life became expensive in ways money doesn't solve," she said at last. Lily frowned like she was solving a puzzle. "That sounds sad, too." Victoria gave a quiet breath that might once have become laughter if she had allowed it. Ethan brought fresh tea for Lily and set another napkin near Victoria's plate. "You don't have to answer every emotional ambush before 8 a.m. "Apparently in this building I do," Victoria said. It was the first full sentence she had spoken that carried dry humor, and Ethan heard it immediately. So did Lily, who grinned as if victory had been achieved. For 10 peaceful minutes, the bakery settled into that rare balance where no one needed to impress anyone. The radio played low jazz. A delivery driver joked about rain. Butter hissed lightly in the oven. Victoria opened one email, closed it again, and found herself watching Ethan help an elderly customer carry bread to the door while still answering Lily's spelling question from across the room. The competence was unannounced, woven into every gesture, not polished, not strategic, reliable. Her phone rang again. This time Mason entered before she could silence it, stepping through the bakery door in a navy coat that immediately looked too expensive for the room. His eyes found Victoria, then Ethan, then Lily, and confusion hardened into calculation. "There you are," he said, lowering his voice, but not enough. "The board has been waiting 20 minutes. Victoria did not rise. "Then they can wait 21. Mason stopped beside her table, visibly processing the impossible sight of Victoria Hale eating pastry in a neighborhood bakery while a child colored beside her. "Is this where your mornings are disappearing?" His tone carried polite concern, sharpened by judgment. Ethan returned behind the counter instinctively, withdrawing from whatever corporate gravity had just entered. But Mason's gaze landed on him anyway. "You're the accidental candidate from yesterday," bakery owner Ethan corrected calmly. "Today, I'm correctly employed." Mason ignored that and turned back to Victoria. "We're discussing a $600 million restructuring, not local breakfast habits." Lily looked up. "He sounds like he swallowed a stapler." Ethan covered his mouth to hide a laugh. Mason stared, offended. Victoria should have corrected the child, should have restored order, should have become the woman newspapers recognized. Instead, she reached for her coffee and said, "Mason, lower your voice. You're disturbing paying customers." The sentence changed the room. Mason noticed it too. Because Victoria Hale never defended atmosphere over authority, never protected ordinary moments, never chose softness in front of witnesses. He leaned closer. "You are late because of this. I am late because I chose to be." For him. His glance toward Ethan made the question ugly. Ethan met it without reacting, but Lily sensed the shift instantly and slid closer to her father's side. Victoria set her cup down carefully. "For 10 uninterrupted minutes, where no one asks me to approve a demolition plan before coffee." Mason's jaw tightened. "That district project closes today." Ethan heard the phrase, demolition, and looked up involuntarily. Mason noticed. Ashbury Block. Old commercial properties, including this strip, I believe. Silence dropped between them. Ethan's hand remained on the counter edge. Victoria turned slowly toward Mason, and for the first time since entering, real cold entered her expression again. But now it pointed elsewhere. We are not discussing active contracts here. Mason lowered his tone, but not his warning. Then perhaps you should discuss them where they belong. He left after that, carrying corporate pressure back into the street, but the warmth he disrupted did not fully return immediately. Lily looked between Ethan and Victoria. What's demolition? Ethan answered first. Sometimes buildings get replaced. Does that mean our bakery? Victoria did not answer immediately because for the first time the project file she had signed weeks ago had walls light smell and a child sitting inside it. Ethan resumed wiping the counter as though the question did not matter, but the stillness in his shoulders betrayed him. Victoria looked at the paper star still tucked partly from her coat pocket, then at the oven light reflecting in the glass case. Something had entered her morning now that spreadsheets had failed to carry consequence with faces. And for the first time in years, the city's coldest CEO felt the first clear discomfort of caring before she had decided whether she wanted to. Victoria left the bakery that morning with Mason's words still hanging behind her like smoke. But for the first time in years, the elevator ride back to the executive floor did not restore her usual emotional order. The mirrored walls reflected a woman everyone in the city believed impossible to disturb: charcoal coat, flawless posture, exact expression controlled. Yet inside her coat pocket, her fingers kept touching the folded paper star Lily had given her, as though the cheap paper carried more weight than the digital contracts waiting upstairs. When the elevator opened, the atmosphere changed instantly. Assistants, rising screens, glowing voices, lowering as she crossed the marble lobby toward the boardroom, where 12 people had already assembled around a table large enough to make agreement feel ceremonial rather than human. Mason stood near the screen with the Ashbury redevelopment file projected behind him. Clean renderings, new glass frontage, projected revenue curves, polite destruction disguised as progress. Victoria took her seat at the head without removing her gloves. Begin, she said, but her voice lacked its usual finality. Mason resumed the presentation with visible relief, speaking in the polished cadence he used when numbers needed to feel morally neutral. Phase 3 requires final signature today. Existing structures on Ashbury are commercially inefficient, low-yield aging, low-value frontage. Demolition begins Monday. A drone image appeared on screen: the old block brick roofs, narrow sidewalks, the bakery visible in one corner as a tiny rectangle of warm color beneath morning light. Victoria's gaze stopped there. She had approved dozens of similar maps before without hesitation. Today, the image refused abstraction because she knew exactly where the front stool stood, where Lily colored, where Ethan leaned when he listened more than he spoke. Delay Phase 3, she said suddenly. The room fell silent. Mason looked up first, assuming he misheard. Delay 2 weeks. That adds cost exposure. Then calculate cost exposure. One board member cleared his throat. Victoria buyers are already attached. She did not look away from the screen. Then buyers can wait. Another director, older and sharper, leaned forward. You reviewed this 6 times. What changed overnight? Normally, she would have answered with figures sharp enough to shut inquiry down. Instead, she removed one glove slowly, eyes still on the bakery roof, frozen in satellite view. I want a second social impact review. Mason almost smiled, not from humor, but disbelief. Since when do neighborhood ovens outweigh strategic land use? The room tightened. Mason knew he had stepped close to insolence, but confusion pushed him anyway. Victoria turned at last, and the cold everyone feared returned, though now it carried something newly unstable beneath it. Since I asked for one, no one challenged further. But the board meeting never recovered its rhythm. Questions returned to financing projections, media optics. Yet Victoria answered mechanically, distracted by absurd fragments, Lily saying people angry all the time were protecting something sad, Ethan handing her pastry without trying to impress her, the way the bakery held warmth without asking permission from anyone. By noon, she had signed 3 unrelated acquisitions and rejected 2 investor proposals, yet the one file she left untouched remained Ashbury. Mason followed her into her office the moment the doors closed. This is because of that bakery. Victoria stood at the window overlooking downtown traffic sunlight cutting silver across the glass towers she had spent 10 years mastering. Careful, Mason. No, you be careful. Investors already think your personal life is a myth. If word gets out that a local widower with flour on his shirt can alter a redevelopment decision, enough. Her tone cut cleanly, but Mason did not retreat. You know what they'll say? That you finally became vulnerable at the exact wrong moment. Victoria turned. You mistake reconsideration for weakness because your imagination ends where spreadsheets do. And you mistake sentiment for wisdom because a child handed you folded paper. That landed because it was close enough to truth to irritate her. Mason saw it and pressed further. You built this company by never confusing emotional discomfort with strategic value. Leave Mason before you undo 10 years over coffee. Now. He left, but the office remained unsettled after the door closed. Victoria stood there longer than she admitted, then opened the Ashbury file again. Not the financial summary, but the tenant list. Carter and Crumb's Bakery. Lease inherited after death settlement. Owner Ethan Carter. Previous profession licensed architect, inactive registration. She frowned. That last detail had never mattered before. A former architect baking bread in a neighborhood slated for demolition. There were stories hidden in that alone. At 5:43, against every pattern she normally obeyed, Victoria returned to the bakery a third time. Evening light transformed the place completely. Morning gold had become amber. Outside street lamps flickered on one by one while rain threatened in the distance. Inside, fewer customers remained. Soft music played low, and Ethan stood on a ladder changing a chalkboard menu sign while Lily sat near the counter finishing math homework. The bell rang. Lily looked up first and smiled like someone greeting an expected chapter. You came back again. Victoria removed her coat slowly. Apparently, I'm becoming predictable. That's how friendships start, Lily announced. Ethan stepped down from the ladder, one hand still holding chalk. Dangerous word in this building? Is that your professional opinion? Victoria asked. Bakery owners specialize in controlled danger. Sugar butter, emotional honesty. She almost smiled again, almost. Coffee, he asked. This time tea. That's progress. He prepared it while she took the same seat by the window, though tonight rain began tapping softly against the glass, making the interior feel more intimate than before. Lily carried over a plate without asking permission fresh lemon cake. House rule, she said. Tea means cake. You have many rules. Dad says homes need them, or feelings get messy. Victoria looked at Ethan over the rim of the cup. You say that I say many things I regret hearing repeated publicly. The rain strengthened. Outside, the street blurred into moving reflections. For several minutes, none of them spoke much. The silence this time felt earned rather than guarded. Victoria watched Ethan close the register for the evening, thank the final customer wipe flour from the counter, then finally sit opposite her only after Lily disappeared into the back room to pack school books. It was the first time he had chosen to sit rather than being forced into proximity by accident. Architect, she said. Ethan looked up surprised. You investigate all pastry providers? Your lease file included history. That sounds like CEO language for curiosity. Why leave architecture? He leaned back, eyes drifting briefly toward the kitchen where Lily hummed to herself. After my wife died, deadlines stopped making sense. Buildings require long futures. I couldn't think longer than one day at a time. Victoria listened without interruption. The bakery. It was hers. Small dream, mostly impossible math. I kept it because ovens don't ask where your mind is. They only burn things if you forget them. The honesty came without drama, and perhaps because of that it reached her more deeply. You rebuilt your life around routine. You built yours around control, he said gently, not as accusation, but observation. That should have irritated her. Instead, it felt accurate enough to disarm. Control is cleaner than grief, for a while. Rain ran harder down the glass. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled low. Victoria turned the cup between her fingers. People assume powerful women fear softness because it weakens authority. Do they assume wrong? She looked at him directly for several seconds. Sometimes softness costs more than authority. Ethan understood there was a history behind that sentence, but did not chase it. The restraint itself shifted something in her because most people rushed to fill silence around her with advice, admiration, or strategy. He simply waited. Finally, she said, "I was engaged once." It came unexpectedly, perhaps because rain made confession easier. Public enough to make magazines profitable, private enough to destroy quietly. Ethan said nothing. He spent 2 years building trust while negotiating side deals against my company through my father's old contacts. Her voice stayed level, but now level required effort. The wedding ended 3 days before it began. Since then, people call me cold because cold is efficient. Ethan leaned forward, slightly elbows on knees. Cold isn't the same as healed. The sentence landed harder than she expected because it held no pity. Before she could answer, Lily returned carrying a jar of colored sugar stars and stopped when she sensed the quiet between them had changed. "Did I interrupt?" "Probably," Ethan said. "Good," Lily replied, climbing into the chair beside Victoria. "Adults get weird when they talk quietly." Victoria laughed, then small, involuntary, but unmistakable. Ethan froze because the sound changed her face completely, removing years in one breath. Lily noticed too and widened her eyes dramatically. "See, you had one." "Had one what?" Victoria asked. A smile. "Temporary malfunction." "No," Lily said seriously. "It fits." Outside, thunder cracked closer. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Victoria looked toward the window, then at the time. "My driver left an hour ago." "Storm's getting worse," Ethan said. "Stay until it passes." A sentence so ordinary should not have felt dangerous, yet it did, because staying somewhere simple by choice had become foreign to her. She remained seated. Ethan rose, lit the warmer lamps, and the bakery shifted into deeper amber shadows, rain painting moving silver across the glass. Lily fell asleep 15 minutes later with her head on folded arms beside homework pages. Ethan lifted her carefully and carried her to the back office sofa, returning quieter than before. When he sat again, the bakery felt smaller, softer, suspended outside the city's usual demands. "Mason said demolition starts Monday," Ethan said at last, not accusing, just naming what now existed between them. Victoria did not lie. It was scheduled. Was I delayed it? Because of Lily. Because I realized files lie by omission. He studied her then, not the CEO, but the woman sitting in borrowed warmth while rain trapped both of them in one room. "You don't owe us rescue." "Maybe not," she said, "but perhaps I owe myself one decision not made by fear, disguised as discipline." Neither moved for a while after that. Rain softened. Somewhere in the back, Lily slept. The city beyond the glass kept rushing, buying, negotiating, erasing. But inside Carter and Crumb's, something fragile and dangerous had begun. Not romance yet, not trust fully, but the first unmistakable evidence that both of them had stepped beyond the stories they had been using to survive. By Monday morning, the rain had disappeared, but the tension it had left behind seemed to settle over Ashbury Street like invisible weather. Ethan unlocked the bakery before sunrise with a heaviness he refused to show Lily, though he had barely slept. Across the street, two black city vehicles were already parked near the corner, and farther down the block, a demolition survey crew stood beside orange markers, speaking quietly while checking clipboards. Lily noticed them through the window while arranging napkins near the register. "Are they here for us?" she asked. Ethan tied his apron more slowly than usual. "They're here for the whole block. But you said maybe not. Sometimes adults say maybe when they're trying not to scare children." Lily fell silent, and that silence hurt him more than any official letter had. By 7:15, the first regular customers arrived, each pretending not to have heard the rumors already spreading through the neighborhood. Mrs. Maya. Donnelly from next door bought 2 rolls she did not need. The retired mailman stood longer than usual near the door. Even the morning light entering the bakery felt uncertain. Softer waiting. Then, at exactly 8 o'clock, 3 dark sedans stopped outside, and every conversation inside the bakery disappeared. Mason Reed stepped out first, carrying a folder expression professionally unreadable. Behind him came 2 legal officers, and then Victoria Hale herself. No coat today, no assistant, no press, only a dark navy suit, and a face calm enough to stop panic before words began. Ethan remained behind the counter, one hand resting near the espresso machine, Lily standing beside him. Mason entered first. "We need 5 minutes," he said. But Victoria moved past him before he finished. She placed a single document on the counter between herself and Ethan. "Not 5, she said quietly. "Just 1 signature." Ethan looked down. It was not a demolition order. It was an amended redevelopment agreement, Ashbury's front block preserved, protected under a community heritage clause, Hale Dynamics funding structural restoration instead of demolition. Carter and Crumb's Bakery listed first among retained properties. Ethan looked up slowly. "You rewrote the project." Mason exhaled sharply behind her, clearly still unconvinced the decision was wise. "She overruled the board at 6 this morning," he said, almost accusing. Victoria ignored him. "The board wanted clean numbers. I informed them clean numbers become expensive when people stop trusting who calculates them." Lily tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Does that mean the oven stays? For the first time in front of corporate witnesses?" Victoria knelt slightly so she was eye level with her. "Yes, the oven stays." Lily threw her arms around her before anyone could react. The gesture was sudden, complete, without hesitation, the kind of embrace adults usually earn slowly, but children sometimes grant instinctively when truth feels safe. Victoria froze for half a second, then rested one hand lightly on Lily's back. Her expression changing in a way Mason had likely never seen, not polished, not guarded, simply human. Ethan watched quietly, something warm and painful moving through him at once, because healing often arrived looking smaller than expected. When Lily stepped back, Victoria rose and looked at Ethan with that same stillness that had once felt cold, but no longer did. "I also reviewed your old architectural license," she said. "The restoration project needs someone who understands both structure and neighborhood memory." Ethan frowned slightly. "You're offering me work. I'm offering you a choice." He glanced around the bakery, the morning light, the familiar shelves, Lily smiling beside Victoria, the life he had rebuilt from grief, one measured day at a time. "And if I choose this place," Victoria's answer came softer than anyone expected, "then I'll keep coming here for tea." That finally made him smile fully, and the bakery seemed warmer for it. Outside, the city continued moving as if nothing historic had happened, but inside that small room, something quiet had been repaired. Not only a building, not only a future, but 2 guarded lives. Learning that sometimes the wrong line entered by accident leads exactly where healing has been waiting.